Hello, and thank you for joining me on my informative speech on today's current and heated political issues. My name is Chase Kasabian, and I'm here to discuss the Kenneth Roth Jr. Police Certification Act of 2021. This is an extremely current act for that it hasn't even been passed as a law in the state of California yet. To summarize this act, it will put into effect essentially the law that a peace officer in the state of California, and a peace officer is a police officer, someone who is a game warden, which is someone who monitors the laws of hunters and fishermen, or a border patrol agent. But it's essentially the law that a peace officer in the state of California cannot be hired or rehired if they have been previously fired for misconduct or have their peace officer certification revoked, turned in, or disqualified. A peace officer certification is basically a college degree that a police officer gets when they complete an academy and all their testing for the roles of their job. So one of the out of all the wonderful things that have happened in the last couple of years, police brutality is one of those topics, unfortunately. Now, this has been brought up throughout all of the years. It's been happening all through history. But one of the most important things that's still happening today, and no matter what background you come from, is you either have an opinion about it or it's affected you directly. So, what this law will help with police brutality is that it will help build the quality of peace officers in California. Since this is a recent act, I have been following it since it's been put in motion as of August 2021. And my cousin, who I'm very close to, is also a peace officer who's went through the whole process in the state of California. This act is the correct way to deal with police brutality and to increase the overall quality of life in California. Now, politics is not something that I personally enjoy looking into or reading about or seeing on social media. However, I do see the importance and understanding of it, and I appreciate how it affects me and my loved ones. Several different companies have rules and policies in place to allow certain individuals to be hired or rehired. And it shocked me that California doesn't necessarily have something like that for its police officers. Firstly, I'm going to go ahead and explain how it's going to affect you and peace officers in California. And then I will talk about how this act is doing it in the correct way and is acceptable on all sides of the political spectrum when it comes to the topic of police brutality. Now, why is this act important? This act is important because it will help identify and incorporate the right individuals to become peace officers. Well, at least it's what it implies. Now, the issue with this bill not being set into law yet is there hasn't been official statistics released while it's been passed. But based on previous laws and statistics, it will help. It is also important to note that this law has been passed by California legislation, but is now sitting on the desk of the current California governor. Now, the California legislation is the same way that the nation's legislation is. There's a Senate and not a House of Representatives, but it's called the Assembly. So in the California Senate, and this is very, very recent, this was yesterday, in the California Senate, it was passed from a 28-9 vote in favor of it. And last week, it was passed in the California Assembly, the state assembly, from a vote for 48-16, which is a pretty high ratio. Now, like I said previous, this is sitting on the current governor of California's desk, Gavin Newsom, but as we know, there's a recall election coming up in the next 5 days. So this bill could make or break certain voters in this election. Factually, no matter what political side you are on, police brutality is a real issue that we faced over the years. And California is one of the few states that doesn't have a process for revoking peace officer certifications for misconduct. 46 states have that authority. I'm not going to bore you by listing all of them, but I am going to bore you by listing the 4 that do. California, Rhode Island, New Jersey, and Hawaii all do not have the authority to revoke a certification for a peace officer. And when I first found this information out, as I'm sure you're all finding out for the first time as well, that was quite shocking considering that California is the wealthiest and most populated state in the entire nation. Now, like I said earlier, I'm not the biggest political fan and I'm not a political expert, but I do understand the importance of it. But what else is important is to understand how there are certain laws and ideas that people do want to push that are either a little too ridiculous or not the general majority will agree on. For example, there's a pretty big idea that if you misgender your pet, it's animal abuse. Now, if you ask me, my dog can do whatever he wants, but the underlying tones of that is to not abuse animals, which is a good thing. But there's also more serious ideas and laws, such as this law that's currently being placed in San Francisco's legislation to give money to ex-drug addicts to stay sober. So to me, that's good because it's stopping drug abuse in San Francisco, but also it kind of doesn't make sense. But that's for you to decide. However, the idea that we can take a peace officer certification by order of misconduct is a good thing that all heads can get around. Now, if a police officer breaks the law, does an unethical thing in their precinct or their agency, or just does something that generally an officer shouldn't do, they're going to get their certification taken away, this as says the bill. So this bill was put together by two state senators. The first one and the one that came up with the idea, the main head of the bill, his name is Stephen Bradford. He's a Democratic governor from Gardena, which is in the 35th district of California. And the senator that's partnering with him is Tony Atkins. He's a Democratic governor from San Diego. And together they have spent the last 2 years kind of formulating this bill and really breaking it down and pushing for it. And it's so far, it's being passed, just sitting on the governor's desk. So it's pretty much through the process. Stephen Bradford was quoted or was interviewed, and he said that the bill will create a strong and effective method for California to remove bad officers in a fair and reasonable manner. Police have one of the most difficult jobs on the planet. A decertification system puts California back on track to restoring communities and restoring faith in men and women in uniform to do their jobs and to do them well. Now, when I read that, I thought about my own cousin, and I was curious as his opinion on this bill. And so I called him up and I said, there's this bill. It's this new thing. It's being passed through legislation. What do you think? And he was shocked. He said that the process to become a peace officer in California is so difficult already that he thought this was already set in place, that a law like this already exists, but it doesn't. So take it from one, officer's mouth saying that he's shocked that it's not there anymore, or it doesn't exist. But yet it exists in 46 other states that are more lenient when it comes to officers. So this bill will change the way that people are hired in California as peace officers, and hopefully will ease the mind of those that are a little bit weary of cops, knowing that the cops that are out there protecting them on a daily basis are a little bit more certified. Now, if you're curious about this bill, you can always look into it. Like I said, there's a lot of information about it. It's being reported on by the news. There's a lot of details that I couldn't mention in the speech that I wanted to. And I highly recommend doing that. It's important to not only know legislation that's already existing in California, but some that's going to be set up soon. So another thing when looking at this bill and police brutality is to understand what police brutality actually is. Now, when you see all these protests and all these horrible things on the media, it can get a little confusing. So like I said, go out there, read about it, get your own opinion for it, and understand it. So in conclusion, being a police officer, like I said, is one of the hardest jobs out there. I have family members who are cops, and I have friends who are cops. So you really got to understand the perspective of people who live with it every day. It's not easy to take your own life, put it in front of strangers, is such a brave thing to do. And I think that a bill like this will help the quality of people that put their lives forward. So in conclusion,